Hey guys, Brandon from Ross RC here. It's 2023, meaning a new year for comps, and we've released our comp schedule, so I figured what better time to come on here and make a video kind of going over the rules and why we're doing what we're doing. So I'm just going to read over a list of rules that we've put together, so bear with me, and sorry if this video is a little boring or dry, but figured what better place than here to just come on here, talk about the rules, kind of show examples of class 1, 2, and 3 that I have currently, and hopefully we can get you out on the trails and come comp with us if you're in the area. If not, maybe you'd like to implement these rules, feel free to reach out and I can get you a copy of these. I'll try to post a link in the description to them as well. So starting off here, these are scale comp rules for 1/24th scale micro comps. You're always encouraged to go above and beyond to make your truck as scale as possible, and your vehicle must resemble or be close to a real one-to-one rig. And it'll be up to a collective group to vote on whether a questionable rig is accepted or not. And for my comps, I think electronics should be hidden from view when looking from above and the side, and the exception to that is always going to be your steering servo. So for example, looking at it from the side, you're not seeing your ESC, your motor, anything like that. You might see a wire here and there, but with this scale it's really hard to get around that. Same thing from the front, you pretty much only see the servo. From the top, you don't see anything. And kind of same thing, class 2 truck and class 3. So yeah, you don't see anything from the top or from the sides really. So hiding your electronics just makes the truck look better in my opinion. So we have 3 classes. Class 1 is more of your street trail truck. Your class 2 is your trail modified, and then your class 3 is your trail unlimited. So I'll kind of go into more of those now. Class 1, it's a street legal style off-road vehicle that you would drive to work or the trailhead and have fun with, but then drive home with it. So examples for these are your SCX24 Ford Bronco or your Jeep Gladiator, but you get extra scale points for having hard body. So I've went with hard body on all of my scale comp trucks. This is the Bronco, which I cut the top off and added a deadbolt cage, and that removed a huge amount of weight off the top, meaning it climbs and side hills quite a bit better. It's still the worst performing vehicle out of all 3 of these, but it performs much better than it did in stock form. So diving further into the rules for class 1, your vehicle must have a windshield that fits the entire or fills the entire windshield frame. So as you can see here, I kept the stock windshield in there and cut the rest of the windows out, but it's still in the stock frame, and so it meets that requirement. And full width bumpers are required on the front and rear of the vehicle, and bumpers that are molded into the body qualify. A rear bumper is not required on a flatbed, but adding one to the flatbed will gain additional scale points, and we'll get into that later on. But bumpers are measured from the outside and must be the minimum width of your windshield. So like this bumper here, it's a little bit more tucked than a stock bumper, but it still matches the minimum width of the bump or the windshield, so it's still class 1 acceptable. Your wheels must be aligned within the body wheel wells, center of the wheels to the center of the wheel wells, with a 1/2 inch maximum total combined deviation. So they don't have to line up perfectly, but they cannot equal more than 1/4 inch outside of that center line on both the front and rear combined. So for this, the rear is pretty much spot on. The front is maybe a little farther forward, but not nearly close to 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch. So we're well within the specs there. The vehicle's body must mostly be intact. Only mild trimming such as flares and removing of a hardtop are allowed. So this one I did some real minor trimming of the fender flares just to shape them a little bit better, and then remove the top, but other than that I've left the body how it is. So the vehicle in Class 1 must run a partial interior or electronics cover. If the top is removed, a full interior is required. So I had the top removed on this, so I kept the full stock interior with this and did not cut any of it out so that you can't see through the body. The tread of the tires cannot extend outside of the wheel wells more than half of the tread width. So if you look at the body from the top, the fender or the wheel wells, the flares should cover 50% of your tire coverage or your tire tread pattern. And so this one, it's really close in the front, but I've had multiple people look at it and confirm that it's about right on that 50% mark, maybe 55% tire coverage. So we're good to go, just barely. But if you need a little extra tire coverage, just put on a little rubber fender flare to extend those a little bit if you don't want to narrow it up a little bit. But I always recommend narrowing it for the courses that we set here as well. Alright, so vehicle must run a full-length rail chassis. The rail chassis must be as long as the vehicle's wheelbase at minimum. So, for example, this is just a stock chassis, not cut or anything, not shortened. It extends beyond the axle, both front and rear. So we're well within the specs for that. Truggies are not allowed in C1. Flatbeds are allowed, but they have to run the full length of the rail chassis. The bed must be as wide as the cab, the entire length of the bed, and a cab only is not allowed in C1. Tires can never extend beyond the body's bumpers or rear of any truck bed. Any stingers, fairleads, shackles, bolts, etc. are not considered part of a bumper when determining this. So the tires cannot extend beyond the body, kind of like how this one does slightly. Maybe not, it's real close. But yeah, dovetailing is not allowed, so pinching the back or pinching the front, narrowing the body is not allowed in Class 1. Bobbing of a truck bed is allowed, so if you had a truck bed that stuck out like a full-length truck bed, you could bob that, shorten it up, but it can only, but it still has to follow all of the body specs in Class 1. So it has to extend beyond the tires. It cannot be tucked in. So say you bob the bed to about right here, it would be within that tire, outer tire plane. The bed will have to extend beyond that in Class 1. And in Class 1, gates will be a minimum of 5.5 inches wide. They'll typically be a little bit wider of that, but I do keep them on the narrower side, so just keep that in mind when you're building your trucks and keep them nice and narrow. I have gone +4 millimeter axle shafts, and that's as wide as I'll go on any of my rigs. But I think Class 1 actually, no, I am +5 on all three of these rigs actually. Alright, so that's pretty much it about Class 1. We'll go into scale points more down the road, but yeah, oh, also tire size. There are tire limitations for each class. And so Class 1, you're limited to 54 millimeter max tire height. These Pitbull rockers, I believe, are 52 millimeter. These are my favorite small tire class or small class tire. They grip really well, and you're also not allowed to externally modify or modify the tire in any way in Class 1. So no trimming of your tread pattern to get it to perform better on the rocks or get more grip in the dirt or whatever. Class 2, your maximum tire height is 58 millimeters. So that's going to be like your Baja Pro X's. I think they're 56 millimeter. RC four-wheel drive also has the IROC Super Swampers that are around 56 or 58 millimeters. So those are a great option. Hyrax also fits within Class 2 specs. And you may, in Class 2, you can start trimming your tire lugs. Now, extreme tire modification, so like cut and shut and gluing two tires together to make a bigger tire, stuff like that will be illegal, but that'll also potentially give you more tire than that 58 millimeter max anyways. So yeah, just tire or tread removal, siping, and grooving is allowed, but no major modifications. Class 3, we have a 65 millimeter maximum tire height, and all modifications are permitted. But we do have a tire ban list at my comp, so I do not allow pins or tractor style tires to compete in the scale comps. I am going to bring in a 4th class, more of kind of a sporty style comp class with your open wheel wells, your kind of Capra style rigs, or not even Capra, more flat rail, twin vertical plate style chassis. So I'll post a picture in the video or down in the description below. But for these scale comps, I'm trying to keep these similar to 10th scale Sorca comps, so having a scale body, hard body, and everything like that, you'll get more points for it. And I like the idea of trying to build a scale rig that can perform as good as possible and then competing against other like-minded folk. So that's why I'm kind of starting this and getting away from the mod versus stock classes and easier courses that pretty much anyone can finish. I like a course that challenges both the driver and the truck, and a competition that'll challenge both the driver and the build. Alright, so let's dive into class 2 now that we've talked about class 1 a little bit. So this is your trail modified truck. There's still quite a few rules, but not quite as restricted as class 1. So you still need to run a full rail chassis that extends it, or that is matching the wheelbase, if not longer. So it has to be at least the length of the wheelbase. And that includes a chassis with a truggy rear end. So if it's a half chassis with a truggy cage on the back, then that truggy counts as the chassis rail. So truggies are allowed in class 2. You have to have a front bumper, no rear bumper, though, although you can get scale points if you have a rear bumper on there. So yeah, truggies are allowed, but you must replace the ladder frame behind the cab with tube, and the truggy rails must extend past the rear axle to be legal. The bed must have a roll bar hoop and integrated shock mounts. It also must be a structural part of the rear of the vehicle. If your bed does not meet all of the preceding criteria, it does not count as a truggy bed. So that's kind of an interesting rule there. I haven't actually seen a 124 scale truggy that performs well and is good for scale comps, that has all, or that meets all these specs. It would be great to see one. I'm sure it can be done, but at this scale, that's just such a small little area for all that cage work. So I haven't seen them yet, but who knows, maybe this year they'll pop up. In class 2, your vehicle must run at least a partial interior or cover over electronics so that they are not seen from above or the side. Your exception is the steering servo. Flatbeds that run the full length of the rail chassis are allowed, and the bed must be as wide as the cab the entire length of the bed. Two of the three following modifications are allowed: dovetailing the rear half the width of the widest part of the cab, a truggy/tube bed that is narrower than the cab counts as a dovetail, both sides, which is cutting or trimming the bottom part off the body, or pinching the front. And so pinching the front 2/3 of the width of, you can only go 2/3 of the width of the entire width of the cab. Dovetailing, you can go rear, so if you have a flatbed, you could dovetail a flatbed, meaning technically your flatbed could be half the width of the cab. So say for like this comp bed here, it's a little bit taller, so you get drop bed points. But If it was a flatbed, it could still be pinched in the rear and the front, but then you wouldn't be able to boat side your body. So you'd still have 2 of the 3 body modifications and fit within the rules. And then in class 2, your gates will also be a minimum of 5.5 inches wide. And so mind your width. Class 2 is a lot harder than class 1 with the courses. So I actually find that the Gladiator wheelbase does pretty well, but any longer than that, you start to not being able to make the corners and everything. I'm considering maybe going a little bit shorter, but I really like the climbability with the Gladiator wheelbase. So far I'm leaving it as is. My class 1's the shorter Bronco wheelbase, class 2's a little bit longer Gladiator wheelbase, and then my class 3 actually is custom wheelbase. It's a deadbolt rear end and C10 front end, so it's real similar to the Gladiator wheelbase. I think actually about 1 millimeter longer. But yeah, so that's about it for class 2. So we can dive into class 3 now, which is your unlimited trail truck. And this is going to be kind of like your Top Truck Challenge, King of Hammers, or We Rock style crawling rig. And rear steer and dig are allowed in class 3 only. So if you have rear steer, that automatically puts you in class 3. A body is required or a tube chassis. So like I think it's a 3D printed Warthog chassis, stuff like that is not permitted unless you have a body on it, just because they're like cheater chassis that they don't look real by any means. So I don't think they should be allowed in a scale comp myself. They're not scale, so yeah. But tube chassis, it has to have like body panels and everything. So like here. So a tube chassis, like a Little Guy Racing U24 chassis, it would work because it has body panels, 3D tube chassis, something you would see on a 1-to-1 rig. A bumper is not required, but to be counted for scale points, it must be mounted to the vehicle's chassis and wider than the chassis rails. Chassis braces do not count as a bumper. So you can't just put a chassis brace in between your rear chassis and call that a bumper. It has to be mounted to the chassis and actually extend beyond it. Body modifications, including but not limited to pinched front, dovetailing, boat siding, are permitted as long as the final dimensions comply within the minimum size rule. So basically that just fits in with tire size and kind of that micro crawler 1/24 size. So like this, I don't actually have it boat sided. I just have it pinched in the front and then a custom comp bed that is nice and short to clear the rear servo. So it's just kind of set up for competition specifically, and it's a lot of fun to drive. But that's about it for class 3 rules. Now we can get into the scale points. So class 1, you can get a maximum of 50 scale points. Class 2 is 40 scale points, and class 3 is 30 scale points. So I set up 2 courses, and each course, if you have a class 1 truck that is scaled out to 50 points, you get 25 points deducted from each score or each course. So say you get 30 points, 30 penalty points on course 1 and 20 penalty points on course 2. On course 1, you would actually equal out to, well, I forget what numbers I said. If you started with 30 points or finished the course with 30 points, your scale points would bring you down to 5. Now, if you finish the course with 20 points of penalties, then your scale points would bring you down to a -5. And then both courses are combined for an overall score. So let's get into the scale points a little bit. You get scale points for full hard body, which is -12, hard body cab only, -6, drop bed, -3, So something like you would see here where the bed actually drops below the bed rails. Complete custom build body, full body is -4 on top of the hard body if it's hard body. Complete custom cab only is -2. Inner fender wells are -1 per pair. So if you have inner fender wells in the front and then inner fender wells on the back, you could get -2. Metal sliders are -3, while plastic sliders are -1. And a slider, it's not just like a slider here. A slider will have to also extend beyond the body and create a platform for the body, or for the rocks to, or for your truck to slide on the rocks without actually making contact with the body itself. So you would have like a little plastic or metal plate that actually wraps up over the top of the body, or over the side of the body, I mean. And then in C3, since tube chassis are allowed, you can get points for tube chassis. Metal chassis is -8, plastic is -4, and then you get -1 for your body panels. A tube bed or flatbed is -3 if it's metal, -1 plastic. Bed mounted rack or roll bars, -2 for metal and 1 for plastic. Truggy, you get -4 points for metal and -2 for plastic. Bumpers, if they're metal, you get -3 for each front and rear. And if they're plastic, you only get -1. A stinger, you can get another additional -1 point on top of the bumper. So a stinger is like a bar that goes up over the hood from the center of the bumper. None of my trucks have a stinger on them currently. Because I find, well, I 3D print a lot of my parts, and a 3D printed stinger snaps off too often. So then you can also get points for like an exterior roof rack or a light bar. You can only get 1 though. So metal roof rack or light bar is -2, plastic is -1, and then light bar, a working light bar would be -1 as well. Interior, you can get, so a 3D interior including steering dash, steering wheel, and floor has to all of that has to be included for it to count as a 3D interior. So something like you would see in the Bronco. 1 seat is -3, 2 seat or a bench seat is -4, 4 seat such as this Bronco is -5, -5, and then if you have an SUV or cargo area, then that would be another -1. A 2D or half interior, so I guess technically actually these are 2D interiors. This would be a 3D interior where you can put a full driver in with legs. So a 2D interior, you don't have legs, it's just kind of at the top of the seat, that's where it ends. So yeah, these would be half interiors, this is a full interior. And then, so this would be a 4 seat here with the cargo area, this would be 2 seat here, and then I would get drop bed points for this having the drop bed. And then you can get points for having a character figure in there only if it's accompanied with an interior. So if it's a complete figure and it has to be scale appearing, you get -4. If it's from the knees up, so you cut the feet off and make it fit, then it's only -3. If you cut the legs off entirely, it's -2. If it's only the head with arms, like you see with these, then it's -1. And then third and fourth passengers, you get -1. And so your complete figures, you can actually get 2 of them. You can get a driver and a passenger, and then for the back seat you get, or so if driver you can get up to -4, passenger you can get -4, and then passengers in the third and fourth seats would get -1 each. Suspension, you can get some points for different suspension setups. So if you have leaf springs, you can get -3 for each. If you have multiple axles, so 3 or more axles, you get -3 for each axle beyond 2. So a 6x6 would have that third axle, you get -3 for that. Chassis mounted steering servo, you get -5 for the front and -2 for the rear. And remember, rear steer is only class 3. A functioning transfer case is -4. And then you have realistic exterior items, whether functional or non-functional. This can include things such as your fuel cell, exhaust, jerry can, hubs, steering stabilizer, disc/drum brakes on all wheels, mirrors, wipers, antenna, license plate, fire extinguisher, trail tools, first aid kit, etc. And then you can get maximum -6 for all of your non-functional scale points. So, for example, that would be like this jerry can, this high lift here, the shovel, the axe, and actually this traction board because it's glued in, so I can't actually use it. Now, if it's functional, you can get up to -8 points for it. And if your traction board is removable, then it's functional. So for me, this one is removable, but then I have a spare battery, a toolbox, jerry can, and a few other things in here, even a pull pal that are glued in, so they're not technically functional. But I do have a winch and a winch hook here, so that would be functional there. So functional items can include toe strap, D-ring, pull pal, sand ladder, hitch, opening doors and hood, spare tire mount, headlights, tail lights, winch, full-size tires, etc. And so if you have 2 D-rings, like I have here on my Bronco bumper, you only get -1 point for both of them. You can't get duplicate points for having multiple, unfortunately. And again, class 1, you can get maximum of 50 scale points. Class 2, you get a maximum of 40. In class 3, you get a maximum of 30. And then the penalty points on course are, you get +1 for a backup or reverse. Every backup counts. If you hit a gate, it's +10 each side. So you can actually get 20 points penalized if you hit both sides of the gate. So don't do that. Take a couple reverses if you need to and shimmy your way through. If you need to pick up your truck and relocate it or put it back on the course at all, that's +10 for a hand of God or vehicle touch. So if you need to make a trail repair, you also get a +10 penalty for a hand of God. If you don't finish, that's +50. If you don't start, well, I've been saying +50, but really it's a DNS or no score at that point. Out of bounds, if applicable, which we can put boundary lines in, drawing them on the course. If you hit a boundary line, then it's +10, kind of like a gate. And if you don't finish, then you get 6 minutes to finish the course. If you don't finish within that 6 minutes, it's a DNF, and all of the gates that you have not progressed up to that point get added on as a gate as well as the DNF score. So you want to make it as far along the course as you can. And then there's also recovery penalties. So if you're stuck on a climb and you need to use a winch but you don't have one, you can use a pull pal or a bungee and do what's called a kinetic or hand winch, and basically just either hold it or kind of pull the truck up the length of about 2 truck lengths. And so I'll have this at all comps, and this will be what we use. And so you can kind of use this to pull the truck up and get up an obstacle safely. But that's +10 anytime you... All right, so sounds like it cut off talking about how, so self-recovery or using a kinetic winch is +10 points instead of +3. So it's kind of hand winch, vehicle touch, +10, same thing, but at least you can keep going on the course. Now, if you have a badge style winch or mechanical winch that automatically retracts as you're driving, it's only plus 3 points. So for example, like on my Toyota here, I have a retractable badge style winch. So I can show you here, it's just like a retractable badge or ID holder, and then I attached a little hook to it. And so if I ever get stuck on something or need to winch out of any situation, I can just pull this winch line, hook it up somewhere, and then let go and start driving again. And as I'm driving, it automatically retracts. I get to the top of an obstacle or clear of an obstacle, I can take the winch, hook it back up, and keep going. So if you have a mechanical winch or like a servo style winch, then those are only plus 3 penalties anytime you use those. So you save quite a few points by using this style of winch over a kinetic winch. And then self-recovery, if you roll, say you're going down a climb and you roll your truck and you turtle and you can't recover without touching it yourself, you can take a rollover where all you do is, without lifting the truck off the ground, you just roll it straight onto the wheels without turning the directions or anything. That's only plus 5. So if you're upside down, you can go either left or right, but not forward or back. So you can only go one side or the other and straight onto the wheels, and then you have to drive it out from there. You're not able to roll it back over and then shift it. That would be plus 10 because you moved the location of the truck. But say there's a wall here, an obstacle, a rock or something, and you rolled it over and the truck is like that, well, for it to count as plus 5 only, you'll have to drive out of this situation. Now, if you had the option to either roll this way or this way, and this way was clear, and you're able to make it to the next obstacle, roll it this way. So it's a mind game, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it, and I enjoy seeing what other people choose to do with their competition runs. And yeah, so I think that about covers everything that I can think of for the rules. So if you're local in the Western Washington area, we're about an hour north of Seattle. Be happy to have you guys out here for a crawling comp or trail day. I'll post a link below to the schedule that we have for our 2023 comp days. I believe we have 7 or 8 set or scheduled currently, and they'll be kind of towards the end of the month, except for a few months. They're kind of in the middle just because of other things going on. But yeah, feel free to ask me any questions. Post in the comments what class you prefer to comp in. I think I like class 3 because of the versatility or the creativity that you can get with the rear steer. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button for more. And yeah, I hope to see you guys out on the trails.